Hey, everybody. Welcome. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. Should be yet another great late night conversation. Yeah, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. We are going to do this once more, and we're probably going to do it again after that. But this is yet another episode of our great program here. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell, and away we go.
Of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. I am so glad to be here with all of you. Yet another late night conversation. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Couple quick announcements. We are having our national CPI gathering, our weekend workshop, April 26th through the 30th. And that will be in Vermont, Burlington, Vermont, where we have a facility that we are co-owners of. So if you would like to attend that, we'd love to have you. Please join the Center for Political Innovation. We'll be putting out an announcement very shortly, inviting people to the national gathering. But if you are a CPI member or a friend or an ally, I would mark that weekend, April 26th through 30th. That will be our national gathering. So it should be pretty cool. Also, you haven't seen, this book is still number one. It is still number one in the category of War and Peace, new releases on Amazon. We are at the number one rating. This book, Who Are the Houthis and What Are They Fighting For? It is something that a lot of people are really excited about. People are reading it, people are liking it, people are buying it. So help us stay at number one. Help us promote this book to tell the truth about the Houthis, to tell the truth about Ansarullah. We need the world to know the truth about what's really going on in Yemen, that Biden shouldn't be bombing Yemen, that the Houthis are heroes for what they're doing in the Red Sea to stand in solidarity with the Palestinians. So that's what this book is about, and you should be doing your best to help us spread the message. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with the way we do things on this channel, first I give my opening remarks, whatever is on my mind for tonight. Then from there, we do the roll call, where I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. And then from there, I answer your super chat or Rumble rant or Rockfin tip questions for the rest of the night. So if you are on YouTube, send me a YouTube super chat to give me something to talk about in the second half of the show. If you're on Rockfin, send me a Rockfin tip to give me something to talk about on the second half of our show. And if you're on the Rumble, send me a Rumble rant to give me something to talk about on the second half of our show. That's the way it works. So just, think of something to get me talking about in the second half of the program. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. So I'm going to jump into my opening remarks now. Folks, I don't know if you saw, but 3 American soldiers were killed by a drone strike that was carried out by Islamic Resistance of Iraq, which is an organization based in Iraq, a militia that is sympathetic to Iran. And U.S. media is playing this up like crazy, that Iran killed 3 American soldiers. Now, we understand that these soldiers were in Jordan, and that Iran and its allies have been targeting various terrorist Wahhabi kind of groups in the area and groups that are linked to Mossad. And these American soldiers were in the vicinity of one of these terrorist kind of groups. U.S. troops are currently in Syria illegally without the permission of the internationally recognized government. And in Iraq, the Iraqi government does recognize and allow these militias to exist. It tends to be Shia Muslims that are in these Iranian-backed and aligned militias that fought against ISIS. And that apparently there was a place in Jordan where they thought some terrorists were operating out of. And so the Islamic Resistance, or the Islamic Resistance of Iraq, which is a militia based in Iraq, which is supported by Iran, struck this area, and 3 American soldiers were killed. Well, this should not have happened, because these 3 American soldiers should not be in Jordan. They should be here in the United States, building bridges, building highways, building high-speed railway. They should be here in the United States, repaving our roads, reconstructing our power plants. They shouldn't have been in Jordan. And instead of spreading instability around the world, the United States should be stabilizing the homeland. And that is not what we are doing. And if you look at Syria and if you look at Iraq, the result of U.S. intervention into both of those countries has been instability. Syria was a very peaceful country. 2011, there were protests as part of the Arab Spring, and then the USA started sending in Wahhabi extremists. Iraq was a peaceful country under the leadership of Saddam Hussein, a Ba'athist Arab socialist. The USA blew it to shreds. Iraq and Syria have both become very unstable because of the United States, and Iran is right there in the middle of it. And Iran feels threatened. And Afghanistan is also on the border with Iran. And the USA kept Afghanistan unstable for many years as well, and let the heroin dealers get back into business after the Taliban had wiped them out. So the Iranians are looking at this, and they're looking at all the U.S. military bases that are surrounding them. They're looking at 2 countries right on their border that have been destabilized. And they say, look, we got to secure things. And so it looks like they were not aiming to kill these American troops. They were aiming to target some terrorists, but they hit some American soldiers, and that's tragic. And their families must be devastated right now. They must be just absolutely devastated to hear that their sons, their fathers, their uncles, their cousins are not coming home. Their brothers, and we don't celebrate the death of these Americans. We're not happy to see people from our country that we love get killed in a foreign war. But we don't blame the Iranians for this, because the Iranians have shown amazing restraint. Do you not remember how the American government killed their top military leader in cold blood? They ruthlessly murdered the top military leader. Now, can you imagine if somebody drone striked and killed the head of the Department of Defense, or killed one of our top generals? Can you imagine what the United States would do? But Iran, other than shooting some missiles at a military base, didn't kill anybody. They showed great restraint after the USA ruthlessly murdered Qasem Soleimani. The USA has enabled Israel to assassinate a number of Iranian nuclear scientists, as well as a number of Iranian military leaders who are in Syria with the permission of the Syrian government. The USA has been going out of its way to murder top Iranian political figures. The USA, basically ripped to shreds the Iran nuclear deal. And Iran has not retaliated. It has actually not really retaliated against the United States. So the idea that Iran is somehow being aggressive here, the idea that Iran is somehow, attacking America, this is not the case. The USA has been attacking Iran relentlessly, not just with sanctions, regime change operations, internal efforts to destabilize the country by funding protests. The USA has been trying to destabilize and destroy Iran for decades now. And they've murdered all kinds of Iranians. And Iran has shown a great deal of restraint. And it looks like unintentionally, a group in Iraq, which the Iraqis are Arabs, they're not Persians, they're not Iranians, a group of Arabs, Iraqis, that are supported by the Iranians. They apparently engaged in some kind of anti-terrorist operation, accidentally killed some U.S. troops. And that's awful. That's a horrible situation. But to make this out to be Iranian aggression is just downright absurd. Look at a map. Where is America? Where is Jordan? Where is Iran? Who was right on the border of whose country? I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. And if you look at what Iran has shown, absolute total restraint in response to the endless provocations from the USA. There's a meme, that it never gets old. It's been around for a while, but it never gets old, right? That just really just makes the point, right? Right. I'm going to see if I can pull it up. It's the, yeah. Let me see. I'm trying to find the original meme, actually. Oh yeah, here we go. Classic meme, right? Wow, I can only find, okay, here we go. Here we go. Let me see if I can find a version of it. I'm finding different versions of it, but yeah, I think just trying to find, oh, here we go. Okay, here's a version of it. Right? This is a meme that just never gets old. Never gets old. And it just kind of makes the point really, really well. It's a very, very popular meme that's been around for well over a decade, but it just makes the point amazingly well. Iran wants war. Look how close they put their country to our military bases. Look at that. I mean, that right there tells you who's the aggressor in this situation. Right there, we know which country is the aggressor. We know which country is engaging in self-defense. And you throw on to that the USA murdered Qasem Soleimani, that the USA got Iran to destroy its nuclear energy program and then reneged on their end of the bargain. That the United States has all kinds of sanctions trying to crush Iran's economy. The USA is funding all kinds of terrorist groups, that are destabilizing Iran, that have murdered Iranian nuclear scientists. I mean, you look at this, the idea that Iran is somehow the aggressor is just absurd. It's just absolutely absurd. But that's how U.S. media is playing this up. And I find that to be particularly frustrating. And those of us that are anti-imperialists, we have a responsibility to stand up to this kind of war propaganda and make clear that, we're not mad at Iran because these 3 soldiers are dead. We're mad that these 3 soldiers died. We are furious about it, that these 3 young men who joined the military because they wanted to protect their country, who joined the military because they were full of patriotism, we're mad that they lost their lives. We're not mad at Iran that they lost their lives. We're mad at Joe Biden for sending them to the other side of the planet for no good reason and doing everything he can, along with Donald Trump, along with Obama, to try and provoke Iran into a situation like this. That's why we're angry. And yeah, we are angry that these 3 soldiers are dead. We are very angry that they are dead. They should not be dead. They should be alive with their families. And they should never have been sent to Jordan. They should never have been sent to that part of the world. These military bases that are surrounding Iran should not be there. Imagine that Iran had this many military bases around the United States, right? I mean, we wouldn't be okay with that now, would we? Right? So, I mean, this is particularly outrageous. And keep in mind that the bases that are in Syria are there illegally without the permission of the Syrian government. The Iraqis have said many times that they want the Americans to leave, but it hasn't happened. So even the countries where these bases are located surrounding Iran, they don't even have permission to be there. So this right there tells you how absolutely outrageous this is. So there you go. There you go. And hey, I see 3 super chats have come in from Battle Cossack. He's in Argentina. Greatly appreciated, and we'll be definitely answering those in the second half of the show. But if other people have questions they want to ask, please throw them out there, because I'm happy to answer people's questions. I'm happy to answer people's questions. I'm happy to spread the truth in a world of lies. But I'm worried about this because Netanyahu seems determined to push full speed into a war with Iran. He will not be satisfied with anything other than a full-scale war against the Islamic Republic of Iran. He just will not turn on the brakes until he gets a war with Iran. And he's murdered so many people in Gaza at this point, 25,000 people in Gaza. There's talk of, straight up genocide, just forcibly deporting all the people. I mean, it's absolutely criminal. The International Court of Justice has come forward and ruled that what Israel is doing is illegal, and Israel just keeps doing it, and it just thumbs its nose at the world. And the Houthis in Yemen, they are doing something about it, right? And Iran is doing something about it. They're trying not to get us into World War III, but they're doing something about it. It appears that Israel's on the brink of invading Lebanon again, right? This is a disaster, right? And you have to wonder, are we going to stand for that? There's a lot of people in Israel that don't like Netanyahu. Are they going to stand for this, right? Netanyahu is a nut. Netanyahu is insane. And he is determined to push the world as close to the edge of World War III as he possibly can. And this is just absolutely criminal and outrageous. And let's hope that cooler heads prevail. The Houthis in Yemen, they have announced they're not stopping ships from China. They're not stopping ships from Russia. They know who the good guys are on the global stage. Chinese ships are free to pass through the Red Sea. Russian ships are free to pass through the Red Sea. They know what side they're on. There are 2 sides in the global class war, right? And one side is the decaying system of Western capitalism and imperialism. And the other side is the forces around the world that have broken free and moved toward national liberation and independence. We've got a deranged Netanyahu faction there that wants to push us toward World War III. Now, I must say, we're heading toward an election season here in the United States. And, I don't endorse any of the major candidates, and we don't endorse any candidate as the Center for Political Innovation. And, we're socialists. We think that, that none of the major capitalist parties have the solution. We'd like to see a government of action that fights for working families. But that said, many of us do feel that if it was a question of who is the lesser of 2 evils, that Donald Trump is the lesser of 2 evils, right? Donald Trump is evil, murdered Qasem Soleimani, big Zionist, big supporter of Israel, says awful things about immigrant workers. Donald Trump is awful. But he at least presents himself as being at odds with the establishment in the United States. He is very much an enemy of the power structure in the United States that feels he's not trustworthy. And he at least gives anti-war rhetoric. He talks about, rebuilding the U.S. economy. He believes in economic growth and rejects the degrowth agenda of Wall Street. And so because of that, Donald Trump, regardless of his intention, it's not about him being a good person. It's just a matter of, the balance of forces. Donald Trump is the slightly lesser of 2 evils. But that said, today I listened to a lot of stuff from Trump supporters. And I don't like it. I'm just telling you, I am worried about where things are going because, Donald Trump is going to win this election if it's a fair election. Biden is so unpopular. Biden is wildly unpopular. And Donald Trump, the economy in the United States was better when he was in, he represents the alienation. But Donald Trump is not sounding good right now. The stuff that he's saying about immigrants, I mean, this barbed wire thing where he's just seems to be blatantly an advocate of cruelty, of man's inhumanity to man. It's one thing to oppose immigration, but when you're celebrating cutting up people with barbed wire, that's just wrong. I mean, the way Trump is talking about Iran right now and the way he's talking about Israel, I mean, I'm not hearing good things out of Trump right now. Trump, sometimes I hear good things out of Trump and other, I mean, that Trump has surprised me. There have been times, especially during the 2016 election, I was at those rallies. I listened to Trump and he said good shit sometimes. So Trump is, sometimes he can sound pretty good about foreign policy. He'll sound a little bit better. He'll say things that need to be said, etc. But right now, I'm not hearing good stuff out of Trump. Now, he's still the lesser of two evils, in my opinion, but I'm not going to vote for him. I'm not going to vote for either of the two candidates, and I don't endorse any candidate. CPI is a nonpartisan institution. But that said, it concerns me that the lesser of two evils sounds so evil. I mean, if you vote for the lesser of two evils, you still vote for evil. But I'm hearing a lot of evil from Trump. Biden is doing evil, and that's one thing that I pointed out many times when people would tell me that Trump was so awful, and there was this hysteria among leftists, among liberals. Oh, we got to do everything we can to stop Trump. We got to stop Trump. And I'd say to them, okay, why? And it was always Trump said. Trump said. I'm like, okay, but tell me what he did. Right? What did Trump do that made him worse, than the Democrats? What did he do? And very few answers I could get, right? Trump said awful things about immigrants. You betcha he did. He said awful things about women. Yep. He said awful things about Muslims. Yep. But what did Trump do as president that was wrong? Well, I can think of a few things that Donald Trump did as president that I oppose. Murdering Qasem Soleimani, the leader of the Islamic Revolution. That was a cowardly thing that Donald Trump did. And it brought us to the brink of World War III. Bombing Syria, directly attacking the Syrian Arab Republic, which Obama would not do. Not good. But Donald Trump didn't provoke the situation in Ukraine to get as intense as it did. He held off doing that. Donald Trump, he eventually, with Venezuela, he provoked it a little bit, and then he finally just said, I'm bored of it. And all the conservatives were angry because he got bored of it, right? There was the whole thing with the food truck and it got lit on fire. And then Donald Trump was just like, you know what? I'm bored of Venezuela. And he just stopped pushing it on Venezuela. And that when Donald Trump was president, there was a general, who resigned because he said that Donald Trump didn't agree with the prevailing opinion of the foreign policy establishment of the United States. Donald Trump admitted that U.S. support for Saudi Arabia was just about the military-industrial complex. Donald Trump admitted that going into Syria, he said, we're going there to steal their oil. I mean, he admitted that the USA is in Syria stealing their oil. I mean, there were some things that Donald Trump did where it was useful to have him saying things that were, things that Marxists and leftists have been saying for a long time. Right. We say, oh, they're going to Syria to get the oil. And they say, that's a conspiracy theory. Where did you read that? Alex Jones? Well, the president of the United States says it. Donald Trump, the president, says we're going there to get their oil. I appreciate that. Donald Trump was talking about the military industrial complex and how much power they have. And Donald Trump was holding back the economic degrowth policies. He was allowing drilling. He was lifting some of these crazy regulations. He doesn't really like the forced state degrowth to stabilize the economy. So Trump is slightly the lesser of two evils, but Trump is evil. And what he did to Qasem Soleimani is evil. And what I'm hearing right now in the Trump camp, I don't like. I don't like the way they're talking about immigrants. I do not like the way that they're talking about Iran right now. I just don't like it. So, I'm concerned. I'm very concerned when the lesser of two evils sounds this evil. Maybe he'll get better. Trump fluctuated throughout his 2016 campaign, but I'm not hearing good things from Trump right now. I'm really not. But anyway, I want to lift your spirits, everybody. I want you to be happier. My job is not to make you feel doomy and gloomy, right? This is not a good situation in the world right now. And this is a particularly bad day, with these 3 soldiers getting killed and Israel possibly going into Lebanon. We're in a bad space. But I know what the answer is. I know what the answer is. And if you watch these live streams regularly, you know what the answer is. But the answer isn't a quick fix. And that's the problem. Everybody wants a quick fix. Everyone wants a quick fix solution. Well, some things in life are hard. The best things in life are hard. Right? The best things in life take a really long time to earn. You make way more money as a doctor than you do as a high school teacher. But doctors have to go to school way more than teachers do. I think teachers should get paid higher wages. But, in order to get the degree that allows you to be a doctor and go into medical school, you have to go to school a lot longer but the payout is much bigger, right? And that I am not here to give you a quick fix solution. And, if you want a quick fix solution, there's a lot of jokers who will give you one, but it doesn't work. There is no alternative to there's really no alternative. We need to build a real movement. We need to build a real movement that has a base among the population. We need to build a real network of anti-imperialist organizers and socialists, working class activists here in America. And there's no way around that. And we can't do that in a week, and we can't do that in 2 weeks, and we can't necessarily do it in a year, but there is no alternative. And that is what we have to do. And so for the rest of my opening remarks, I'm going to tell you what we're doing as the Center for Political Innovation, because we have to do it, right? And I'm going to explain to you the strategy that we have pioneered and developed that nobody else has, right? The Workers' World Party has been doing the same thing for the last 50 years. The PSL has been doing the same thing for the last 50 years. The Communist Party has been doing the same thing for the last 50 years. But we at the Center for Political Innovation have pioneered a new strategy called Out of the Movement to the Masses. And in particular, in this book that I wrote, Where is America Going? Marxism, MAGA, and the Coming Revolution. In chapter 3 of this book, I talk about top and bottom organizing. And I talk about a method through which non-state actors, right, and that's what we are. It's in this chapter, Counter Gangs and Revolutionaries. And go and read this chapter. If you have this book, go and read chapter 3 of Marxism, MAGA, and the Coming Revolution, Counter Gangs and Revolutionaries. And in this chapter, I talk about George Sorel. I talk about the Second International and Marx. I talk about the Bolsheviks. I talk about the Chinese Communist Party. I talk about all kinds of things. And I basically explain the process through which countries go to socialism. And I talk about the process through which mass working class revolutionary movements are built. And the way that they are built is they are built with a style called top and bottom organizing. Right? That around the world today, there are many different organizations that, the Pentagon, William S. Lind, the Pentagon strategist, he calls them non-state actors. There's different names for them, but these are more or less illiberal organizations, illiberal formations that exist. And, that serves some kind of purpose. These are organizations that have an ideology that are not liberal. They believe that truth exists. They organize people to fight for a cause. They provide a community for people. They provide services to the community. They educate people with an ideology. And they exist all over the world. And, the communist parties of the world are these kinds of organizations. Religious organizations around the world serve this purpose. All kinds of political organizations, religious organizations, community organizations serve this purpose. They are illiberal organizations that teach people an ideology, that provide services to people, and organize people to assert themselves. And these organizations generally have a dual nature. On the one hand, they organize at the top of society because they make themselves useful allies to one faction in the ruling class in its struggle against another. The Bolsheviks were allies of the capitalists who wanted to bring down the Tsar. They were against the Tsar, and so were a number of capitalists in Russia. And so in February of 1917, they teamed up with the bulk of the capitalist class, and the Tsar was brought down. The Bolsheviks were allies of the Russian capitalists who did business with the Germans and wanted World War I to end. And they led strikes, down with war. They were known as the anti-war party. They were this mass organization that was opposed to World War I. The Bolsheviks were allies of the government of Kerensky, the provisional government, when it faced the Kornilov uprising, when the military led by the Kornilov faction tried to overthrow the provisional government. They defeated Kornilov, and it was after that they were able to take power. They were organizing at the top of society and acting as, a counter gang or a group of foot soldiers for different factions of the elite of society. So they were organizing at the top. That's top organizing, top operations. But at the same time they were doing that, they were building up their own organization. They were recruiting their own people. They were building their own labor unions. They were building their own communities. They were recruiting their own members. They were building up their own militias. They were teaching their own ideology. So they also engaged in bottom organizing, which is going lower and deeper to the real masses and building a base of people among the population who are loyal to them and expanding their own ranks. So they organized at the bottom of society to build their own organization, and they organized at the top of society in order to make allies and become useful in the internal fights among the elite. This is called top and bottom organizing. And this is how every communist or socialist or anti-imperialist revolution that has ever been successful has been carried out. You have an organization that on the one hand, it plays a dual role. On the one hand, it is a useful group of foot soldiers to various leaders within the power structure. And on the other hand, it is very good at building a base for itself among the population. And the more that it builds a base, the more effective of an ally it is for the people at the top. And the more of an effective ally for people at the top that it is, the more resources and strength it has to build a base. It's top and bottom organizing. And by organizing on the one hand as an ally to different factions among the elite, and on the other hand as just a community of people with a base among the population, this is how illiberal organizations grow. This is how the Bolsheviks grew. This is how the Chinese Communist Party grew. This is how Hezbollah grew. This is how the Houthis grew. This is how Bolivarian socialism in Latin America grew. This is how Gandhi grew. This is how, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. grew. This is how the Black Panthers grew. This is how illiberal organizations, non-state actors, entities that have an illiberal view, that believe in truth, and mobilize people to fight for a purpose, this is how they are successful. Top and bottom organizing. And that this is a breakthrough that I have developed by studying the work of Frank Kitson, the British intelligence officer, by studying the work of William S. Lind, by studying the work of the Bolsheviks and Lenin, by studying the work of George Sorel, by reading the Sorelian critique of the Second International, by comparing the Society of December 10th that Marx opposed with the Second International that was the Marxist organization that was unable to create a revolution. We have pioneered a method of organizing, a strategy for building the kind of movement this country needs called top and bottom organizing, right? And no other group is doing this, right? No other group is doing anything near. No other group has pioneered this kind of understanding, right? While all the other groups are just doing the same old thing and somehow expecting different results, we have pioneered a strategy for building an illiberal organization through which America can be reborn as a society where the banks and the factories and the industries and the centers of economic power work in the interest of the people and not the profits of a wealthy few. And if you read my book, Counter Gangs and Revolutionaries, chapter 3 of Where is America Going, you will learn all about it. Or go and read Who are the Houthis and what are they fighting for? What you will read about is a case study how in a very, very poor country, the Houthis engaged in top and bottom organizing, right? Hussein al-Houthi was a member of parliament, but he organized the poorest people. He organized the people at the bottom of society, but he aligned with the people at the top of society. And he built through top and bottom organizing, he effectively mobilized within the divisions within the Yemeni ruling class. He built a base among the population. He also made alliances, and one thing led to another. And now they are running Yemen, and they are the heroes of the whole world. And they're giving voice to the poorest people in the world. This is called top and bottom organizing. And this is a unique concept that the Center for Political Innovation has developed. And as we prepare for the year of 2024, I'm telling you that we are going to engage in top operations and bottom operations. We are going to engage in work in which we are aligning with different factions of the ruling class. And we are going to engage in work in which we are building our own organization. And the year of 2023 was a very successful year for the Center for Political Innovation. We had a very, very successful year. But mainly what we did in the year of 2023 was top operations. We mainly showed that we still existed and that we were capable of pulling off effective top operations in which we were taking positions within the power struggle within the American elite. We opposed Joe Biden's Summit for Democracy. We opposed it. And we had a big convention in Washington, D.C. to oppose it, right? And that was, of course, representing there are people at the top of society who oppose Joe Biden as well. And, you know, it was in Washington, D.C., and we had Scott Ritter speak at it and Garland Nixon, and we had a whole 2-day convention opposing Joe Biden. And during that convention, what did we do? We went to the White House and we unfurled a beautiful banner. And what did that banner say? It said, finish what Trump started. Finish what Trump started. Finish what Trump started, peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. Saying that we supported the Trump faction negotiating with Kim Jong-un, and we opposed Joe Biden, who was escalating things on the Korean Peninsula. Again, that's a top operation. And then we confronted Tsai Ing-wen, right? The Taiwan separatist president on the streets of New York City. And we confronted her, showing that we were in support of the capitalists who want to do business with China and who don't want to escalate things on Taiwan against the capitalists who want to escalate, right? We had an event opposing the military-industrial complex, supporting the Uhuru movement. And that showed that we took one position. And throughout the year, we engaged in a lot of top operations. We ended the year, though, with a very successful bottom operation, which is we organized our own national convention. And we raised money only from our own members, mind you. We didn't get big donations for our convention from anybody but our own members. Some of our members, shout out, you know who you are. I'm not going to embarrass you or violate your privacy. Some of our members really stepped up to the plate, and we were able to put the money together, and we organized our first national convention in December. And that was great, right? And top operations are important, but bottom operations are also very important. And bottom operations is where we are currently lacking. Because our organization, we spent the whole year of 2023 just getting as much done as we possibly could. Organizationally, right? We had some problems, right? We need to get our structure more intact. Now, coming up this spring, we are going to have a 4-day national workshop. That's a bottom operation. And that 4-day national workshop is about recruitment and it's about political orientation to understand what is unique about our project. It's 4 days of classes. And that whole thing, that is not about aligning with any figures in the ruling class. That's not about, showing that we are useful allies in divisions in U.S. society, that we can advocate against war, that we can advocate for economic development and against degrowth. That's not what we're doing. That 4 days is going to be 4 days of intense political study, bonding with our members, group activities, talent shows, all kinds of fun stuff. But it's going to be dedicated to solidifying our organization and expanding our base and influence. However, then coming up, July 9th, then July 9th through 11th, the NATO summit is going to be happening in Washington, D.C. And we're going to be involved in protests against the NATO summit. And that is going to be a top operation, because we know that John Bolton said that if Donald Trump gets elected president, NATO will be dissolved, and that there is a big faction in the ruling class that is against NATO. And we're going to be there showing that we can be effective anti-NATO organizers, right? And that is a top operation. And yeah, PSL will be there protesting NATO. Screw them. We don't care, right? Libertarian Party, well, we might want to talk to them or whatever, but we're not there trying to recruit other protesters. During the NATO summit, we're going to be there to show off our strength, show off our abilities, and make clear to those in the ruling class that are opposed to NATO that we are an effective organization that can carry out effective operations to oppose NATO, and we should be useful allies, and we would like to align with you against NATO. And then in July and August, the Democrat and Republican convention will be happening. And at both of those conventions, we will put on events outside the conventions. We'll have little conferences and events, and we'll have literature distributed. But that stuff is not going to be aimed. We're not trying to recruit the Democrats. We're not trying to recruit the Republicans. We're trying to show figures in the ruling class who would agree with what our message might be. We're trying to show them that we can be effective allies. I believe that if Kamala Harris is on the ticket for the Democrat Party, what we will do in Chicago is we will have an event devoted to opposing Kamala Harris. Now, there is a chance, right? We know Kim Iverson said Gavin Newsom she thought would be the candidate. There is a chance that Vice President Kamala Harris will not be on the ticket. However, if Vice President Kamala Harris is on the ticket, I am going to write another book. I've already written one book about Kamala Harris, but there's been so much information that has come out since the time of that book, and so many people that have approached me with information. I will write a second book about Kamala Harris, and we will have an event at the Democrat National Convention in Chicago, not at the convention, but near it, to oppose Kamala Harris and warn the world about the queen of mass incarceration, the sociopath who hates her father and had no problem, almost lethally injected Kevin Cooper, and has no sympathy whatsoever, no empathy whatsoever, was willing to execute an innocent man, and how, she is psychologically programmed. She's dangerous. She's a sociopath. I mean, she's not a sociopath. She's a narcissist, actually. She's a sadistic or malignant narcissist. And we will expose Kamala Harris at the Democrat convention if she is the vice presidential candidate, because that's the only hope she ever has for being elected. Kamala Harris will never be elected president of the United States. She's unpopular. Americans don't like her. However, if Joe Biden gets reelected, which would be I don't understand how that could possibly happen. If Joe Biden gets reelected, we all know he's an old man. We all know he's not all there. And I think the chances of Kamala Harris becoming president of the United States, if Joe Biden is reelected, are very high. And we must not allow that to happen. And I had just got my hands on the new book written by staffers, exposés from staffers of Kamala Harris, revealing what goes on inside of her office. And I have got all kinds of information. And if Kamala Harris is the nominee, we will have an event at the Democrat convention somewhere near it opposing Kamala Harris, and we will have protests against Kamala Harris, and we will position ourselves to be the ones raising the alarm about Kamala Harris. And I don't care if Trump people listen to me. I don't care if Green Party libertarians listen to us. We are going to be the ones who say what we said, the Center for Political Innovation said before anybody said, right? What we said is now common knowledge. No one talked about her father. Now they talk about her. No one talked about her ties to mass incarceration, except for like Reason magazine. Then we talked about it. We have been at the forefront of exposing the dangerous psychology of the woman who is the vice president of the United States. And we will be there. And if they're going to nominate her for VP and put her in the position to be one heart attack away from the presidency, we will be there at the convention raising awareness about it. I don't know how we're going to do it. Maybe we'll have a glossy magazine, The Truth About Kamala Harris, that we can distribute thousands of copies of to the convention. Maybe we'll have an event. I don't know what we're going to do. But if Kamala Harris is the nominee, we don't endorse any candidate. We're not campaigning for anybody, but we will not let her pass without telling the truth. The message that we put out in a book that won awards, well, it didn't win any awards, but it got international recognition. A book that I wrote that was praised by the Morning Star, communist newspaper of the United Kingdom, that was praised in newspapers in India. That was, my book on Kamala Harris, like, raised eyebrows across the planet. It was earth-shattering, right? That book that I wrote about Kamala Harris, we will get an updated version of that thesis on the record at the Democratic National Convention. It will be heard in the streets outside the convention. People will know how dangerous the Kamala Harris presidency, the notion of a Kamala Harris presidency is, because they will try to sneak her into the presidency. They've got everyone convinced that Donald Trump is the worst thing ever. And so they're using that to try and give us Biden again. And Biden's presidency is intolerable. Genocide Joe is intolerable. And they know that that is the only hope they have for Kamala Harris becoming president. In 2016, Hillary Clinton went down in flames. She lost. 2020 election, Hillary Clinton wanted to run again. And they had a meeting in Long Island, and all of Hillary Clinton's supporters pulled their money from Hillary Clinton and gave it to Kamala Harris. And I document that in the book. And I showed in the book, I showed who Kamala Harris is and why she is so dangerous, what's really going on, the divisions in the ruling class. And we will be out there. We will be out there with that message. And I think that there are many people within the military, right? Tulsi Gabbard was one of those people, used her limited time on the debate stage. I think there's many people in the Trump camp. I think, Douglas McGregor, and, there's a lot of people who know how dangerous Kamala Harris is, right? And we will be out there. We will be out there with that message, and we will show to people in the ruling class who are very worried about her. We will show that we are useful in spreading the truth about this dangerous, dangerous candidate, right? And we'll obviously have to do something at the Republican convention as well, right? Maybe we'll talk about degrowth. Maybe we'll talk about how free market economics is the problem. We'll figure out some kind of intervention that we can carry out at both conventions. We will figure that out so that we show, and these are top operations. We're not trying to recruit the Democrats. We're not trying to recruit the Republicans. We're trying to show that we are useful allies. And then after the conventions are over, after the NATO summit is over, then we have to transition back to bottom organizing. We'll have to figure out about when we're going to have another convention. We're going to have to figure out what we're doing, because we have to keep our organization together. Top and bottom organizing is the strategy. And we have no interest in the left. We have no loyalty to the left. None. But I'm thinking ahead. Because I know that the only way out of fascism and war, the only way out of the low-wage police state, the only possible way out of it is to build a real movement in this country. The Center for Political Innovation has 143 members at this time. I think that soon, If we do our job effectively in the next year, we could have 300 members very easily. We could have 600 members a couple of years after that. We could have members of Congress reading our publications, right? This book is already the top book on Amazon, right? In terms of War and Peace, we are at the top of the list. We're number one at this moment. So we are building the kind of movement that can change this. That is what we can do. And it's not a quick fix, right? I wish I could just make the threat of war with Iran vanish. That's what I wish I could do. I wish I could make the low-wage police state vanish. I wish I could make their satanic agenda of trying to make us live in pods and not have children and eat bugs for dinner. I wish I could make that go away, but I can't. What I can do is I can build a working class movement. That's what I can do. And I just want to slap. I apologize. I don't want to commit violence against anybody. But sometimes I get frustrated because I meet so many young communists who suffer from what I call the dual delusion. On the one hand, they think they know everything. They have the exact correct interpretation. They know it all. They know it all. They have this really obscure, specific understanding of exactly the correct line of Mao and Enver Hoxha and Trotsky or whatever. They think they know it all, which they clearly don't, because if they knew it all, they'd have built a movement by now. But they think they know it all on the one hand, and then on the other hand, there's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can do. No, it's hopeless. I guess we just have to do whatever's trendy, do whatever the Democrats are trending. Well, first of all, you don't know everything. You don't know everything, right? And look, I'm telling you, I've been reading the books for years. ML is the foundation. It is the foundation for my understanding of the world, but it's limited. It's got its limits. And there's a reason that China doesn't talk that way anymore. There's a reason that Cuba and North Korea don't talk that way anymore. ML is the foundation, but there's other layers, okay? So you don't know it all. None of us know it all, right? And we should study all of this. All anti-imperialist movements, we should study them. Islamic socialism and Islamic revolutionary ideology, Baathism, right? Bolivarian socialism, Christian socialism in Latin America, anarchism. We should study all of it. Socialism with Chinese characteristics. We should study all of it. We should understand that what we are doing is we are moving toward developing a unique, innovative model for America in our time. That is what we are doing. And if you're not doing that, you're being silly. And we are the only ones doing that, let me add. We are the only group that has the common sense to realize that communism in Russia was not the same as communism in China, was not the same as communism in Korea, was not the same as communism in Cuba, that the Islamic Republic of Iran is way different than Venezuela, which is way different than North Korea, which is way different than Vietnam. The global anti-imperialist movement is very different, and every country has a unique form of anti-imperialism and socialism constructed for their unique circumstances. And we are the only tendency in America that has the common sense to realize that when it comes to America, it's going to be a unique form. We're the only group that says, look, we're not Maoists, we're not Trotskyites, we're not anarchists, we're not socialists, we're not Islamists, right? We're not Bolivarians. We're Americans. And the only type of socialism that will ever work in this country will be a uniquely American form of socialism. And we're the only group that has the understanding that our job is not to try and copy some foreign ideology, but our job is rather to cultivate the unique ideology, to innovate the unique ideology that will work in this country. Why we are the only group that has that level of common sense. No other organization has that common sense, that we are not copying something that worked in some other country. We are innovating in order to move ahead and build something that will work in this country in this time. That is unique about our organization. That's why we're not the Communist Party. We're not the Socialist Party, the Labor Party. We're not a party. We are a center for political innovation, because what we are doing is something that has never been done before. What we are trying to figure out is how we can crack the code in these unique circumstances, in this unique country. And we're the only ones that have that level of common sense. And that is what makes our organization so dynamic, so absolutely dynamic. Everything that we do is absolutely dynamic because of that. There is an electricity that runs through our events. When people come to our events, they applaud, they cry, they cheer. There's something about us. We have a spiritual energy that you don't find in other organizations because we understand this reality. We are not engaging in live action role play. We are doing this for real. We understand the unique dynamics, and people walk away from our events saying these are serious people. There's a serious energy here. When I join this organization, I feel like I belong. Go and watch the amazing conversation I had with Gabby. She explained it better than I could. Go and watch the conversations. Go and watch the videos from our convention. There's going to be a few more videos that come out in the next couple days. We have something unique, and that is the only way out of this crisis. And that is not an easy, quick fix. And I know that, right? And I wish I could just get on here and tell you, but I'm telling you, the only way that we will stop the march toward World War III, the only way that we will do that is if we build our movement. We must build our movement. And our movement is pioneering new territory and pioneering new ground. We have the unique understanding of top and bottom organizing. We have the unique understanding of building political innovation, engaging in political innovation to fight for a government of action that fights for working families. You know, we are doing something unique here. And we need your help. And I need you to be part of it. We need you. So sign up and become a member. Come to our workshop in April, and then come with us to Washington, D.C. and to Chicago and to Milwaukee this summer. We have operations to carry out. We have a mission that must be accomplished. We know what we are doing. And that is the only answer toward the war threat against Iran. That's the only answer, right? And it's not a quick fix, but it's the answer. This is what I can give you. This is what I can give you. Paul Allen just asked me a good question. But this is what I can offer you, right? I am doing my part. One of these idiots, one of these doofuses, one of these days we're going to have to talk about one of these rival political groups. There is one particular organization that is extremely dangerous, and we're going to talk about them at some future stream, not tonight. But one of these people, they claimed, I kid you not, they claimed that CPI doesn't do anything. They actually said that CPI, the Center for Political Innovation, does not do anything. And that is such a ridiculous claim to make. And I said, maybe, watch my New Year's message. Watch my New Year's message about what we did in 2023 and tell me we don't do anything. Right? That is the PSL position, is that we don't do anything, which is, it's like comedy, right? Pigs can fly. We don't do anything, right? But that's what their members believe. But their definition of doing anything is whatever the Democrats are doing, organize a rally around it. We did quite a lot. And I think that, before we do our roll call, what I will do, since we're talking about how do we get out of this mess, what I will do, apologies to those of you that have already seen it. And I appreciate the super chats that have come in. I'm looking forward to answering those questions. But I think what I will do is I will show our 2023, our movement is growing, my report for 2023. I'm going to show it. I apologize to those of you that have already seen it. But it needs to be seen once again. Because we did such a lot and we have a lot to offer. We are a small organization, but we have a lot to offer. I'm going to put that video on once again. I appreciate the super chats that have come in. I'm really looking forward to answering those questions. So we'll do the roll call after I show this video. And then from there, I'll answer people's super chat questions. So I guess here we go. Here we go. Everyone, and Happy New Year. This is my annual report about what the Center for Political Innovation has done in the year of 2023. Now, we've had scores of new members join, and we've engaged in all kinds of very serious activities aimed at spreading anti imperialism and a message of revolutionary hope and optimism among the American people. I will quickly go over some of what we accomplished in the year of 2023. On February 19th, the Center for Political Innovation sponsored the biggest anti-war protest that has happened in 20 years. The Rage Against the War Machine rally brought together a number of important personalities, different figures to oppose the drive toward war against Russia and China. We then sponsored a reception that took place after the Rage Against the War Machine rally, where we gave a platform to Scott Ritter. Our reception, held at a hotel near the White House, was attended by over 160 people. It was a great step forward for our organization. March 5th, we published this book, Where is America Going? Marxism, MAGA, and the Coming Revolution. The book has received a number of very positive reviews. It was featured on Kim Iverson's show, and hundreds of copies of the book have sold. I recently signed a contract for the book to be published in Chinese, and that's coming up in 2024. Now, March 25th and 26th, we held a 2-day Summit Against Hypocrisy in Washington, D.C. to counter Joe Biden's Summit for Democracy. 75 people attended this 2-day anti-imperialist conference. Peter Coffin created a documentary film about it. March 30th, 5 members of the Center for Political Innovation confronted Tsai Ing-wen, the so-called president of Taiwan, when she was in New York City. We confronted her saying, "Stop selling war in our country." The video clip of us confronting the Taiwan official went viral in Chinese media. We were featured in the Global Times. Center for Political Innovation joined the Libertarian Party and the People's Party to have a rally in New York City's Union Square, raising awareness about the need to stop the war drive against Russia and China. Our rally then marched from the Union Square Assembly Point up to the United Nations, where the New York City Peace March, convened by religious leaders, was taking place. We joined the religious rally where the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, that's facing heavy persecution at the hands of the U.S.-backed NATO regime in Kiev, was given a platform. I also took the podium to represent the Center for Political Innovation alongside a number of New York City's most prominent pastors, imams, and rabbis. And later, the Center for Political Innovation was invited to a reception at the United Nations to discuss future peace marches convened by clergy in New York City. In June, the Center for Political Innovation held a weekend workshop in Missouri. 40 people gathered for 3 days of socialist education, group bonding activities, discussion, and strategy. On July 10th, the Center for Political Innovation convened an event in New York City called Money and American Injustice. The event featured critiques of the U.S. legal system and how it unfairly targets low-income and working-class people. The guests of honor were representatives of the People's Democratic Uhuru movement that are currently facing an FBI, Department of Justice indictment, calling them Russian agents. Peter Coffin made another documentary film highlighting the event and how the U.S. legal system unfairly targets the working class. On August 6th, the Center for Political Innovation co-sponsored a National Day of Action called Humanity for Peace, convened on the anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima. In Portland, Oregon, and in Chicago, we organized the rallies, and in New York City, we brought a very large contingent to join the rally, along with a number of other organizations. On August 27th, the Center for Political Innovation published this book, Letter to Bob Avakian, critiquing a prominent U.S. communist leader for his failure to stand with Russia and China, and exposing his ties to French intelligence and how he was used by the FBI to intimidate Jimmy Carter and harass Deng Xiaoping. On September 15th, the United Auto Workers called a strike for better wages and conditions. Among those striking was a CPI member named Tom Michalak, who stood on the picket line with his union brothers and sisters, presenting an optimistic anti-imperialist message of city builder socialism amid this important labor upsurge. On September 20th, during the United Nations General Assembly, the president of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Ibrahim Riazi, sat down with myself the founder of the Center for Political Innovation, for a full interview. Now, the interview was broadcast over RT News, translated into many languages, and viewed by millions of people all across the world. In October, as Gaza faced a brutal bombardment at the hands of Israel, CPI members joined pro-Palestine rallies across the country, standing in solidarity with the Palestinians and arguing that the continued support for Israel and its crimes goes against the interests of the American working class. On October 25th, the Center for Political Innovation was formally selected by the Russian Foreign Ministry's Youth Office to lead the American delegation to the World Youth Festival taking place in March of 2024 in Sochi, Russia. We were honored to take on this responsibility and immediately spoke with the Party of Communists as well as the American Student Union. And we have now successfully formed a national preparatory committee for an American delegation to the festival. I personally attended the International Council of the World Youth Festival that took place in Moscow. November 4th, the Center for Political Innovation was a co-sponsor of the Black People's March on the White House, highlighting the Uhuru movement and their persecution by the Department of Justice. CPI member John McCarthy was invited to speak at the rally, and afterwards had dinner with Chairman O'Malley and the leaders of the Uhuru movement, who personally thanked CPI for our efforts and hard work in support of them. On November 19th and 20th, the Center for Political Innovation's president, Elizabeth Young, attended the 5th International Conference of the World Anti-Imperialist Platform in Athens, Greece. Elizabeth spoke to the gathering, highlighting the urgent need for anti-imperialist organizing in America and explaining CPI's role and activities. On November 30th, CPI organizers visited 3 different campuses in Portland, Oregon, and unfurled American flags and Palestinian flags, as well as a banner that said, "Money for jobs and schools in America, not weapons for Israel." Footage of these dramatic interventions that were very well received by passers-by and locals in Portland will be included in Peter Coffin's upcoming documentary film. December 1st, the night before our national convention in Portland, Oregon, we held an event at a church, along with the Party of Communists USA, to give a platform to Jyoti Brar, the leader of the World Anti-Imperialist Platform. She spoke and gave a lengthy presentation about the need to stand with Russia and China, the need to stand with Iran and the Palestinians, and the fight against opportunism in the international communist movement. On December 2nd, the Center for Political Innovation held its first national convention in Portland, Oregon. The event was attended by over 150 people: Scott Ritter, Garland Nixon, Syed Hosseini, Jyoti Brar, Lee Stranahan, David Rovics, and many other prominent guest speakers performed and spoke. In addition to that, we had guest speakers from Veterans for Peace, Seattle for Assange, the Party of Communists USA, the American Student Union, and other organizations. Chairman O'Malley of the Uhuru movement made a special video message thanking us for our support and supporting the conference overall. We also had video messages from Tara Reid and Craig Pasta-Jardula of the Convo Couch. On December 3rd, members of the Center for Political Innovation, who are of religious inclination, founded City Builders Ministries at a special gathering in Portland, Oregon. We discussed about building a campus ministry oriented toward anti-imperialism and working-class politics, showing that Christianity and socialism can overlap, especially in the 21st century. December 8th, 9th, and 10th, we had yet another weekend workshop, this time for new members in the Pacific Northwest region. A number of people have joined the organization since our December 2nd convention, and I think it's fair to say that our organization is marching ahead. Now, we intend to put forward an annual report like this every year, so that those who consider themselves to be friends, allies, or members of the Center for Political Innovation can see what we have accomplished. Those who've helped us to engage in these activities can see that the money they have donated or the time that they have taken to help us out is going to good use, that we are simply not wasting our time. We have big tasks to carry out in stopping the danger of a new world war, opposing the low-wage police state, and marching forward to build a new America. Throughout the internet, you will find claims that the CPI has dissolved or the CPI no longer exists, and this is just utter silliness. The Center for Political Innovation has accomplished a huge amount in the year of 2023. probably more than it accomplished in all the other years of its existence combined. Let me ask you, if a similar report were to be given by the leaders of a number of the so-called communist organizations in the United States, what would be in it? If Joe Sims of the Communist Party were to give a report about what his organization has done this year, what would they be able to say? That they campaigned for Democrats, they registered people to vote for Joe Biden, they called Trump supporters Nazis? And what about the Party of Socialism and Liberation? If Brian Becker were to give a similar report, what would he include? The fact that they screamed and yelled about abortions and demonized average American people while tailing after what the liberals were doing. The fact that they facilitated the very important upsurge of pro-Palestine activism that took place, but oversaw making sure it just repeated the same old slogans and remained isolated from the bulk of the American working class. What the Center for Political Innovation is doing is very unique and special. There is no other organization that's capable of fomenting the same kind of optimism, hope, patriotism, and city builder socialism. We have something very unique and special, and our project is doing something that no other organization is capable of doing. The reason we continue to have such success, and we are so well respected internationally, is because of our unique approach, pushing forward to build 21st century socialism in America and spread anti-imperialism among Americans who are now struggling, left behind amid the failure of neoliberal free market capitalism. And we already have big plans for 2024. We have already endorsed and given sponsorship to the Rage Against the War Machine 2 Defeat the Deep State rally, set for Washington, D.C. at the Lincoln Memorial on February 17th. We intend to be there in big numbers and make a good contribution to the rally. In addition to that, in March, we will be going to the World Youth Festival, called by Russian President Vladimir Putin in Sochi, Russia. At the gathering, we will join with anti-imperialists, young communists, and anti-imperialist forces from around the world to speak about the new emerging economy centered around the BRICS and the need for technological innovation and expansion of living standards and a higher life expectancy for all. In addition to that, we are planning to have a national workshop in Vermont this May. At the national workshop, we will roll out the second volume of our educational textbook. We already have volume 1, We Are City Builders, but volume 2 will be coming out, and it will accompany a new set of classes focused on organizing and the history of revolutionary working class and anti-imperialist movements in the United States and what we are trying to do now in our time. CPI also intends to be involved in upcoming anti-NATO mobilizations in July. We expect to hold another national convention, this time in the Midwest region, most likely in the weeks following the 2024 presidential elections. The focus of CPI in our upcoming year will be really taking to heart our slogan, out of the movement to the masses. Social media is much more controlled than before, and online recruitment activities have their limits. CPI is reinventing itself to become an outreach-oriented organization with members witnessing socialism in their neighborhoods to their co-workers and their friends. CPI wants to reach people who would never go looking for this kind of message or ideology. We call on people who want to find their voice, want to join a community, want to spread hope amid so much pessimism to join our ranks. We will put you to work. So much needs to be done to build an anti-imperialist movement and a network of activists here in America. Furthermore, the Center for Political Innovation depends on donations from supporters, allies, and members and friends to carry out its work. Holiday season is a great time to send a gift to our organization to help us continue to do the work that we do. Giving to some social media personality who entertains you, or one of the same old peace activist groups that has marched for years and grown smaller and smaller will mean much less. We at the Center for Political Innovation stretch every dollar we receive in contributions to make sure that our organization is growing, thriving, and conducting vital anti-imperialist work. We are forced to think of how Vladimir Lenin told his followers that if the situation changes in 24 hours, the tactics must also change in 24 hours. We are also forced to think of how he said, There are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen. There is no doubt that we are living in vital times here in the United States. We expect to experience substantial growth in the year of 2024, but we will need your support in order to do it. Members, prepare to be more involved. Friends, prepare to see more exciting activities and events that you can participate in. Donors, please give generously to make sure that we do these things with the resources that we need. I wish you all a happy holiday season with your family. Let me remind you that whatever hardships, isolation, and pains you are suffering are only temporary, as a new wave of hope and prosperity, generated by the heroic struggle of the people and the new rising alternative economy centered around Eurasia, is on its way. Future generations will look back on us with admiration for our ability to endure and refuse to back down in the face of the desperate viciousness of the dying old order. With revolutionary love and solidarity, I wish you all a happy new year. That's what we did in 2023. So yeah, PSL thinks we didn't do anything. That's hilarious. All right, folks, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you, and then I'll start answering people's questions. So names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? We got Mark in Utica, New York. Mark Jones in Utica, New York. Welcome, Mark. Sherry asked about buying the book not from Amazon. It has wider distribution, so all you have to do is go to your local bookstore and tell them the name and title. They should be able to order it from you. It's with all the major book distributors have it. Nate in Chicago, Jenny Lynn in Cincinnati, Bob Troy in New York, John Whitty in Houston, Steve in Boston, Rice from Adelaide, Australia, Jay in Texas, Rumble, very good. Dave, San Jose, Dave, right? Very, very good. Very, very good. Steve in Boston, Kiwi Corner, Auckland, New Zealand, right? Craig from the desert of Western Arizona, Neil Fraser in Hong Kong, Anoan in the Chamber of Khufu, all right. David in Vietnam, St. David's, Bermuda, Patch in Arizona, Detroit, Michigan, JT24 in Mississippi, Wiz in Philly, Jorge in Yoruba Valley, Terry Barnes in UP of Michigan. Chicago CPI is on fire. Yes, I can't wait to hear how the meeting went. I know that the Midwest Innovation Circle had a meeting. I'm very curious to hear how that went. Seasoned Noob in China, Ali Rahan Muhammad in Florida, Patrick in Maine, Chairman Meow in Arizona, Binghamton, New York, Sherry from Cape May. Welcome, welcome, welcome. True Dang in Oakland, California. Christina in Portland. Shout out to Christina. Very good. Doing the book group. Bruce in Manila. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right. Names and locations. Anyone on the Rockfin? Names and locations. There we go. Names and locations. We got Western Australia, Craig in the desert. Well, welcome, Craig in the desert. There we go. All righty. So why don't quick thing, right, guys? I'm just going to throw this out there before I start answering people's questions. Okay, I don't follow the far right generally. I mean, I kind of know the far right. I know the different groups, CPI, I used to be part of what you call the far left. CPI, we're now pretty independent. We don't align with the left or the right? There's one of these far right, white supremacist groups. It's called what's it called? It's called the National Justice Party. I heard that they dissolved. Okay. I just heard that in December, that organization liquidated and their website no longer exists, and that they are no longer in existence, and that two of the Charlottesville Nazis, Eric Stryker and Mike Pinovich, they formed the National Justice Party. They had a website and stuff, and they liquidated. I am curious to find out why that happened, because we have faced a huge amount of subversion and attacks and stuff in CPI. And I think, I mean, obviously we don't agree with that organization, but, organizational dynamics and manipulation of people that are in alternative social media, it's worth paying attention to. So if there's anyone watching who knows why the National Justice Party liquidated, send me an email. I am very curious for any information I can get about that. I want to study that situation. I want to know why that happened, right? So if anyone has any information about why the National Justice Party dissolved, send me an email, calebmaupin@gmail.com. They probably all became trans. I have a feeling that's not what happened, but who knows? But if anyone has any information, I really would like to know the inside baseball. I'm very, very curious because small organizations, have different dynamics. They get targeted in different ways, and I'm just curious how this happened, right? I'm curious what happened, right? I also feel like, this group Patriot Front, which is a Nazi organization that everyone says are feds. They have to be feds, right? I mean, it's just Kim Iverson and Jimmy Dore. They all look at them and say they're feds. I'm curious what people know about that as well. But if anyone has any information about why the National Justice Party dissolved, I really would like to know about that. I think that's some important political intelligence that we should be aware of. Because I have not seen any liquidation documents. I have not seen any liquidation statements. So wow. But anyway, if anyone knows why they liquidated, because they're Antifa, there you go. All right. All righty. I'm curious about why they liquidated. So if anyone has any information on that, send it my way. I'm very curious. All right. This stupid, pointless fighting between alt-left and alt-right makes average people more apolitical. For the ruling class, having an apolitical majority is beneficial for them. First of all, alt-right is Richard Spencer. That's a term that a white supremacist named Richard Spencer, who is a real asshole on many levels, just a real asshole. Obviously all Nazis are assholes politically, but I mean, just as a person, right? I mean, for a while he was really trying to get my attention. He wanted me to debate him, and I was just not. Why would I debate him? And Richard Spencer, who's just, Richard Spencer, every interview he talks like this. Yes, I am a Nazi. I answer questions like this. I mean, he has I am an edgelord. I mean, it's just awful human being named Richard Spencer, who's a white supremacist and a racist and from a super wealthy family. He started a website, altright.com. And then alt-right is a term. And then Hillary Clinton used the term alt-right in her attack on Donald Trump. She gave a speech against Trump where she started talking about the alt-right and how a bunch of Trump supporters were Nazis. And then alt-right took on a totally different meaning. So now, technically alt-right only referred to followers of Richard Spencer, but the term started to refer to, there's a group in the Pacific Northwest called Patriot Prayer. There's the Proud Boys. There's certain groups that engage in, they scuffle with anarchists. They scuffle with the left. That's generally what the term refers to. But alt-left, what is alt-left? Right. I at one point started calling myself alt-left, and then people said you shouldn't say that because that means people think that you're alt-right or something. So I stopped saying it when people said it would lead people to believe I'm a Nazi or something. I don't know what the alt-left is, right? I don't know what the alt-left is, right? There's the woke left, and I'm not woke. I don't know if I'm left anymore. I mean, communism historically is a left ideology, right? Anti-imperialism, etc. But I tell people I'm not loyal to the left or the right. I'm just an anti-imperialist. I'm a socialist. I'm an optimist. I'm a constructor. I consider the Communist Party to be part of my heritage, but I'm not loyal to the Democrats. I'm not loyal to the left side of the political spectrum, but I don't know what alt-left is. Okay. Right. Alt-right was a brand. It was, copyrighted to Richard Spencer. It was white nationalism. It was an attempt to take white nationalism in a new direction. White nationalism, quote unquote, I mean, it's white supremacy, but white nationalism was, generally anyone who called themselves a white nationalist is a David Duke supporter, right? David Duke, former Ku Klux Klansman who quit the Klan and ran for Congress, called himself a white nationalist. David Duke, that was the brand of David Duke, and they're Nazis, right? They don't think the Holocaust happened. They think Hitler was a great guy. They think there's a secret Jewish communist conspiracy, blah, 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 blah. They're Nazis. But the name that Nazis started using in like the 90s is they started calling themselves white nationalists. And Richard Spencer was one of those, but he wanted to take it in a different direction. So he started calling himself the alt-right, and that's what alt-right is. Alt-left has no meaning. And I briefly started saying, well, I'm the alt-left. And then people said, don't say that because then they're going to think you're part of the alt-right. And so I stopped saying that. I don't even know what alt-left is. I will say that there is the social justice left. They used to call them SJWs. It started out on Tumblr. Do you remember the app Tumblr? And it was, the people who talked about privilege and was it white privilege and mansplaining. It was on Tumblr. It was like the Tumblr kind of people. There's that versus the like internet libertarians who like share memes about dropping communists out of helicopters and there's I don't know that those you're right that's a dead end, right? The SJW left versus the racist asshole bro right, that's a dead end. You're right. It doesn't offer real solutions, and it's all very pessimistic, and it's anti-human. It's all anti-human at the end of the day. It's not optimistic. It's not constructive. It's just kind of people shouting at each other, and one side is shouting you're racist, the other side shouting you're communist, and I don't know. It's just, yeah. And at the end of the day, we need real politics, real policies, real solutions, real analysis. And you don't get that from the internet discourse. Okay. There you go. There you go. All right. When you talk about having soldiers build bridges and power plants, I imagine an overly patriotic man saying that's not the military's job. They are soldiers, not construction workers. Well, you'd be wrong. When there's a hurricane, who do they send in? The National Guard, right? I mean, here in New York City, Hurricane Sandy, they sent out the National Guard. When there's a big earthquake, they send in the military. The military can play a civilian role. Hugo Chavez, the president of Venezuela, that's what made him so popular. Is Venezuela, right after he was elected president, in Venezuela, they had a string of mudslides where many people's homes collapsed. There were mudslides. And so he sent the army to go help the people deal with the mudslides. And because of that, because he did that, he became very popular. And in fact, in your country, Battle Cossack, Juan Perón, right? That's what he was famous for. There was an earthquake in Argentina, and Juan Perón was the leader of a military division. And he led his military division to go help people in an earthquake. And that was the beginning of Peronismo, Juan Perón and Evita and all that stuff that started with the military. The military can serve a humanitarian purpose. Generally, yes, the military is for fighting, but not always, right? The military can also serve a humanitarian purpose, right? There's many examples of that throughout world history, right? That they mobilize disaster relief. There's obviously other organizations in the country that can do that, but the National Guard, the military is often sent in times of national emergency. All righty, very, very good. Why do some people, mostly libertarians, hate public workers? They complain about unemployment, but they don't want the government to give them a job. Yeah, libertarianism is just, it's a lot of flim-flam economics. One thing libertarians will say is I've heard many libertarians say this. I don't know how they can say this. Anyone who knows anything about economics, I have heard so many libertarians say, the only types of jobs government can create are government jobs. Bullshit, right? Government jobs pay wages to people. And with those wages, they buy things in the private sector. Right? Think about it, right? In the United States, public employees, you got teachers, they're public employees, right? You got police officers, they're public employees. You got firemen, They're public employees. You got, government bureaucrats who do the Department of Labor, the Department of Welfare, the Department of Housing, all of those people are all of that's millions of dollars. It's paid out in tax money to have people do government functions. All of those people live in houses. They all eat food. A lot of them have children that they feed. And so all of that money goes into the economy, right? It goes into the economy from those government jobs. But libertarians don't notice that. And they go, oh, the only type of jobs that government can create are government jobs. It's like, no. Yes, technically, the only job a government can officially create is a government job. But the spending that comes from government employees creates all kinds of other jobs. And imagine if every public employee in the United States were fired. Do you know how badly that would hurt the U.S. economy? There would be that much less spending power on the part of the U.S. public. We'd sell that much less food. We'd sell that much less stuff, right? Government employees getting paid wages to do things is a very big part of our economy. And it's necessary, right? You need a fire department. You know what they had in New York City before the fire department? They had a gang. They had this gang. It was an Irish gang that went around. They would knock on your door and they'd say, we put out fires. And if you give us money, if your house catches on fire, we'll put out the fire. So you better give us some money because I'd really hate for your house to catch on fire, if you know what I'm saying. It was a protection racket, right? If you did not give money to this gang, not only did they not come and put out the fire, but your house conveniently caught on fire right then. And you can read about it. It was basically a protection racket. And the reason that we created actual fire departments was because the mafia, and organized crime was basically functioning as the fire department in many major cities. And there was the Great Chicago Fire. Remember the Great Chicago Fire? Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicked over the lantern or whatever, right? There were many examples of. It's a necessary public service, right? And libertarians can sit there and they can go, oh, well, if a fire department was really necessary, the market would create it. Well, it created organized criminal elements that did a really horrible job. I think it's much better to have guys whose job it is to fight fires than it is to have, organized criminal elements running a protection racket in your neighborhood, right? And somebody you're going to have to put out fires, right? And I don't know. Anyway, I'm exaggerating here, but I'm talking here about you need public employees, right? And again, libertarian philosophy, libertarian economics, nobody talked this way. The Austrian school was a very obscure group of weirdos. It wasn't until the 70s, as a way to push for austerity, that suddenly that stuff got wildly popular. Milton Friedman was on PBS, etc. That stuff really didn't blow up until then. And it was just an excuse for austerity. And what infuriates me is they say things that are just not true all the time, like that the only jobs the government creates are government jobs. It's like, that's not actually true. The wages paid out to government employees, that's just not true, right? And I have heard libertarians, they'll say the only kind of monopoly that ever exists is created by the government. No, there's what's called a natural monopoly. Libertarians say things that are just flat out wrong about economics all the time, and no one knows anything about economics, right? People only know about, the left just focuses on social justice or whatever. And so the right talk about economics, and they basically know the contents of Econ 101. The consumer votes with their dollar on what they want, supply and demand, and then all of a sudden they think they know everything because no one can argue with them. Natural monopolies, read about it. Monopolistic stagnation, right? The general law of capitalist accumulation. Yes, monopolies do exist, and there's all kinds of antitrust laws and stuff to break them apart. There's all kinds of laws that they've passed to prevent the creation of monopolies that the capitalists themselves wrote to make their own economy work, right? There's many, many examples of why libertarian economics is just bunk, okay? It's just bunk. It is silliness. And, Richard Wolff, he used to be around the RT studio. He's an economics professor, and he would talk to me about this. He said he was watching Fox News one day, and they were all upset because they were saying that there might be a wealth tax, right? And they're like, oh my God, you can tax income, but you can't tax property. And he's like, of course you can tax property. It's called property taxes. If you have a piece of property in a city, you pay property taxes, right? I mean, it's just absolutely insane, right? That they say things, about economics that are not based in fact in any conceivable way. I mean, it's just, there would never be any monopoly if it wasn't for the government. Oh, here's my favorite. This is a great one. If there was no minimum wage, everyone would have a job. You ever heard this one? This is a really common one. If there was no minimum wage, everyone would have a job. Well, geez, they didn't create the minimum wage until they created like the Fair Labor Standards Act in 1938. But I looked at the history books. There was all kinds of unemployment before 1938. Did you know that? I mean, that's so ridiculous, right? I mean, there'd be, the only thing preventing unemployment is this minimum wage. The government forces the companies to hire everybody and pay them this certain wage. And so then they can't hire everybody it's not true. There was unemployment long before there was a minimum wage. The minimum wage forces the employers to pay a certain amount, which then bumps everybody else up, right? Like, I mean, the minimum wage is actually, this is absolutely ridiculous. There's no unemployment, and they just say this and no one argues with them. Liberals hear them say shit like that. There would be no unemployment if there was no minimum wage. And liberals go, you're a racist. And it's like, oh, that'll convince them. Nobody talks about economics. And then they tell me I'm a right winger because I talk about economics. Right? Oh, Caleb sounds like a right winger. No, I sound like I know what I'm fucking talking about. I use statistics and data and all of that. And they don't want to argue with me. You'll notice that. You watch some of my debates with libertarians. I start citing actual economic data, and all of a sudden they change their tune because they're snakes, right? When I'm not there, communism never worked anywhere. It failed everywhere it's ever been tried. And when I'm there with Dave Smith and Spike Lee or Spike Cohen or whatever his name is, all of a sudden, whoa, they don't say that because they know that I won't fall for it. There is so little knowledge of economics. Right? Economics is really important, right? And Marxism without economics is not Marxism, right? Marx was an economist, okay? And more than any other economist, he studied the work of other economists. Marx drew heavily from Adam Smith. Marx drew heavily from David Ricardo. Marx drew heavily from many different, scholars and such. So, it's just, Marx was an economist, and the essence of Marxism is economic. And so there you go. I hope I answered your question. I know you're living under Malay out there in Argentina. And so you're seeing libertarian economics in practice and how frustrating it is. So there you go. Please discuss the growing fascism against our First Amendment rights. Students on campuses have been doxxed and their careers threatened. People are losing jobs, anti-BDS laws. Why obey Israel here in America that isn't that fascist? Well, Paul, okay, so there's a couple things there. First of all, right, the cancel culture, let's be real, it started with the neocons, right? People say it started with the left. That's not true. It started with David Horowitz. I remember this, and it was before social media got going. It was Fox News. They would pick out a college professor who said something wrong, and they would run their name through the mud on Fox News and destroy their career and get them fired. They did this to many college professors, many high school teachers. They invented it, right? And then the left, so to speak, got it going on social media. And it started out, it was against like blatantly racist speech, stuff like that. But then it turned into just being against conservatives. And then it turned into the Me Too thing. And now it's taken on a life of its own. And now, circle back, conservatives are doing it again to people that oppose Israel, right? And that's the doxing truck that was driving around Harvard with the face of all the students who criticized Israel on it. And that was actually a moment where I was kind of impressed because Candace Owens and Vivek Ramaswamy, even though they both support Israel, they opposed the doxing truck. And then Candace Owens, because of the fact that so much of her audience, because so many rank and file conservatives are anti-Israel, right? If you look at the comment section on InfoWars, Alex Jones, you look at the comment section on any of Trump's speeches, there's a lot of anti-Israel stuff. Unfortunately, most of it is blatant anti-Semitism, right? Because they're not Marxists or leftists. They don't understand imperialism. So it's just Jews are bad. We don't like Jews. Well, we're not okay with that, obviously. We're not okay with any form of ethnic bigotry, right? We would never push hatred for anyone on the basis of their race or religion. We're above that, right? But there's a lot of people in the Trump camp who don't support Israel. So Vivek Ramaswamy and Candace Owens both opposed doxing anti-Israel students and said that was cancel culture. Very interesting, right? And that divide was interesting. And Ben Shapiro attacked Candace Owens. And then Candace Owens had, if I'm not mistaken, she had Norman Finkelstein on her podcast. And she just let him talk. She didn't like call him an awful person. So there's a divide in the ruling class right now. Israel has way too much power. I mean, look, Israel, it is illegal in a number of states to work as a government employee if you must sign something saying you'll never boycott Israel. A number of states. Could you imagine that? Right? I mean, that in order to be a public employee in many states, you have to sign a document that says you will never boycott Israel. That's ridiculous. Right? Free market. What happened to free markets? I can boycott whoever I want. Right? I don't have, that's ridiculous. I can boycott whoever I want to. Right. Israel has a lot of power in the United States. Absolutely. Now, fascism, Paul, again, I would encourage you to go read my book, Where is America Going? Marxism, MAGA, and the Coming Revolution. Fascism is caused by the breakdown of capitalism. It's caused by a crisis of overproduction. The second chapter of my book, it's called, I think what is it called? It's called Bonapartism and Fascism in the 21st Century, right? This is all about what fascism actually is. And I recommend reading R. Palm Dutt and his very good book, Fascism and Social Revolution. Fascism is when capitalism enters a long-term crisis, when people are homeless because there are too many houses, when people are hungry because there is too much food, when people become impoverished because capitalism creates abundance. The capitalists fight with one another, the rich and powerful. One faction of capitalists seizes control of the state and then uses the state to drive down living standards, to enact degrowth, right? That's what fascism is. But Joe Biden and his faction are very fascistic because they think the way to solve this economic crisis we're in is with degrowth. And that is the nature of fascism. Fascism is dramatically reducing the productive forces, driving down living standards with forcible state power in order to stabilize the crisis. Fascism is more or less austerity, right? And that is a really important understanding. And R. Palm Dutt, in his book, Fascism and Social Revolution, which you can read online, right? I mean, Fascism and Social Revolution by R. Palm Dutt. You can read that book online. There's a PDF of it. I mean, it's a very important text, right? That if you want to understand what fascism actually is, go read Fascism and Social Revolution by R. Palm Dutt. It is a very, very important text that gets to the economic essence of it. Peter Coffin was introduced to that book by me, and it changed his worldview. He loved it, right? Fascism and Social Revolution. Very, very, very important book. All right. Thank you, Paul. I hope that's helpful. Also, go and read my book or read chapter 2, right? There's an audio book of my book on YouTube. Go read chapter 2 of my book, Bonapartism and Fascism, and you'll learn the economics of fascism. Fascism is not just suppression of freedom of speech, right? That happens all the time. We're opposed to that. And the Uhuru case, right? There's, unfortunately, the judge did not rule in favor of their motion to dismiss. So it looks like there may be a trial date soon for the Uhuru 3. And so we're going to have a full update on that soon. I'm waiting for more information about that. But yeah, it looks like the judge did not rule in their favor. So we're going to wait to see what happens with the Uhuru 3. That's an important case. We're keeping our eyes on that. But, the attack on the Uhuru movement, and it's just a huge violation of their rights. I mean, it's an attack on free speech. Absolutely. Okay. Would you ever do a convention in Las Vegas? Sure. Yeah, I would be for it. We don't have a big layer of people there. One of the things that you need to do to have a convention, right, is part of the reason we did our convention in the Pacific Northwest is we had a group of people out there. We had people out there. The reason that our next convention is probably going to be in the Midwest was we have people out there, right? We don't have a group of people out there. Now, if you are interested in helping put it together, not a convention, but an event, like a conference or an evening meeting, and you are in Las Vegas, join the Center for Political Innovation and say you'd like to have me come out there, right? Because I am all for it. But in order to have an event, you have to have someone rent a space. You have to do promotion. You have to make sure you have people there. And if you don't have people on the ground, that's very difficult to do. I don't know of any members we have in Las Vegas at this time. But I would love to go out there. I've been out there. I was out there when I was a kid. My family, we went to go visit the Grand Canyon. I've been out there. Nevada is a beautiful state, and I would love to go out there and have a convention sometime. So if you want to do it, I would encourage you to join CPI or start looking into a venue in the area. Start thinking about promotion and how we could get people to be there. And let's make it happen, right? I'm not opposed to having an event out there. A convention, that's for the whole organization. But in order to have an event, you have to have people on the ground making the event happen. This is one thing that a lot of people just don't realize. A lot of these young men, I am convinced, they believe that all they have to do is declare themselves to be the leader. I am the leader. And then the organization just springs up all around them. It doesn't work that way. It does not work that way, right? In order to build an organization, in order to build a movement, in order to be a leader, you have to do stuff. You have to have real relationships. You have to stuff doesn't get done unless people do it. And you have no idea. People just have no idea how much work it is to put on a convention, how hard the people out there, Elizabeth and Marissa and, so many people worked really, really hard to make our convention happen. Right. And people don't realize that. Right. And that this is something that people don't realize, that people don't understand, that things don't happen right by themselves. And that I think a lot of people just don't realize that. So Adam, if you want me to do an event in Las Vegas, I'd love to go out to Vegas sometime. Start looking into a venue, start thinking about who could attend, who would be in the audience and promotion. Send me an email. My email address is calebmaupin@gmail.com. And start brainstorming. And if you're willing to help make it happen, I'll do it. I would love to go out to Vegas, and meet some new people out there and organize an event out there. I'd love to do that. Right. I want to get to every corner of this country. I would love to get out to Vegas. So there you go. Send me an email, start looking for a venue, think about when I could do it, etc. And we could do it. So there we go. All righty. What about mainstream newsroom layoffs? I haven't heard any specific details. I know that there's been a lot of layoffs throughout the media, but media is changing. Look, mainstream media doesn't have a monopoly. Most people get their news from online now. Look at your daily newspaper. It's much shorter than it used to be. Mainstream media is quite unpopular. The amount of people you need to run a newsroom is decreasing. I would interpret that in terms of the media landscape is changing. The amount of people you need to run like a mainstream newsroom is decreasing. Print media is dying. It's just the whole field is changing because of the internet, because of social media, because of streaming, because of many, many different things, because of many different issues. So there you go. There you go. So there you go. All right. Okay. Oh, Garland. Great show as always. Well, great to see you, Garland, and good luck. I have been running here and there. I haven't been on your show as much as I'd like to be lately, but I love Garland and I love Dr. Wilmer Leon and the show they do. Garland was a great speaker at our convention. He gave a great talk. It's on the website. Shout out to you, Garland. That's great. That's absolutely great. And very good. Very, very good. Thoughts on nuke warheads being placed in the United Kingdom? Well, look, again, right? Not good. Not good. I told you about how I was at the UN and that reporter said, are you planning to use nuclear weapons in Belarus? And Lavrov is like, no, they've been there for 6 months, and he explained why. And she's like, there's no evidence Ukraine is using nukes. He said, I didn't say that Ukraine is using nukes. I mean, look, the imperialists have been threatening Russia. They've been threatening, they've been putting nukes on the Korean Peninsula. They put, North Korea has been shooting off missiles, and they don't tell you that's because Joe Biden's been sending nuclear weapons submarines to South Korea. There's nukes out everywhere now. It's Joe Biden is trying to light the world on fire as much as he possibly can. So there you go. There you go. All righty. Any recommendations on organizing community support networks in rural America? Well, I think the main thing you got to do, is you want to find out who is in your area, because the issue with rural America is that the population is much more dispersed, right? That you don't have as many people in an area. So what you need to do, right, is you need to, find out who are the people in your area that like what you have to say politically and network with them. One thing I noticed from the times that I was organizing, like in the South, when I was organizing in Ohio a little bit, is that in more rural areas, the kind of people that are open to this kind of message, that there's much more diversity, right? In the New York City and all of that, communist groups are all sectarian and they're all at each other's throats. But if you're in a little town, like there might be one or two people in the town that are interested in this kind of stuff. So they'll tolerate a lot of disagreement and they'll put up with each other. The other thing that probably makes it very difficult to organize in rural areas, right? And I've seen this, is that, and this is something that it frustrates me, but right, because many people in rural areas are Republicans, and many of the things that they believe are very backward, right? They're anti-immigrant, they're pro-free market. Many people in rural areas who are free thinking assume the Democratic Party is the answer, because it's not. They're just surrounded by Republicans. The whole area is just completely Republican. And so they just assume the Democrats are the opposite of that, right? Of whatever they don't like about, conservatives or Trump supporters. And, there might have been some truth to that in the Bush years, but at this point, it's not the case, right? And that a lot of times I've noticed among people in rural areas, they just kind of put on blind spots, and they'll join a group like the Party of Socialism and Liberation or the Communist Party USA, and they will just ignore all the stuff that I say about, out of the movement to the masses and all of that. They'll just ignore all of that because they're just like, well, no, my neighbors hate immigrants. My neighbors think that Biden's a communist. So the Communist Party of USA that supports the Democrats is amazing. And it's not, right? I would say, Terry, the main thing is don't sound like a Democrat. If you're going to engage with people in a rural area, the main thing is you cannot sound like a Democrat. You have to make clear you are not a Democrat. You are opposed to Joe Biden. You are opposed to the Democratic Party. You are opposed to the deep state, and you have to find common ground with what conservatives think, because right now, actually, a lot of things that conservatives believe about the vaccine, about the wars, about mainstream media are on point. Now, they don't have any answers. Their answers are libertarian economics, hating immigrants, right? Obviously, they don't have the answers, but they are more critical of the establishment. So the less that you sound like a Democrat, the better. The more that you can show agreement with their critique, but then point them toward the actual solution, the better, right? And that's what I would do. I would try to find common ground with the things that conservatives oppose the establishment on, and use that as a basis for starting a conversation. Maybe start a reading group, right? We have CPI reading groups with our educational manual, and we're doing that again. Maybe if there's a few people in your area who are interested, who have some common ground, get a couple copies of We Are City Builders, the CPI educational manual, have a reading session, get together at your place for coffee or unnamed diet beverage or whatever, tea, and sit there and 2 or 3 people read sections from We Are City Builders and discuss them and see what people have to say and see if they're open to it. Every section of the educational manual of CPI, every section of it has a set of discussion questions at the end of it to help learn the content. And so, I would start with the manual. And if there's 2 or 3 people that are open to this, that are at odds with the establishment, maybe they're conservative, but they're against the wars, they're against the deep state, they're questioning the vaccine, whatever it is, right? And sit down with them and see if you can get them, because, they're interested and, there's not a lot going on in rural areas. See if you can get them to, do a couple chapters from the manual, go over the questions, tell your thoughts, do a reading group. That's my advice, Terry. Do a reading group. But the main thing is, Terry, whatever you do, don't just do it. Send an email to me about how you do it. Tweet about it on social media, because we need people to see what other people are doing. Maybe, Terry, there's something you can do in your rural area that I can't even think of, but you figure out how to do it. Don't just do it by yourself. Let the whole world know about it, so other people in similar circumstances can do the same thing. That's what I would advise you to do, Terry. I would advise you to try to figure out what you can do, but make sure that other people learn about it so you can replicate it. Now, Terry, have you joined the CPI? Have you become a member? Because we have a Zoom call every Saturday, and these are the very kind of questions that come up on our Zoom calls. We're always giving people support from around the country. So, Terry, you really should join. You should become a dues-paying member of the CPI. You should come to our Saturday Zoom call for the members. You should join the online reading groups, and that'll help you get orientation, right? I'm not just telling you that because I want you to join the group. I'm telling you that because you can be plugged in with other people that have the same questions. Look, we just had a new member join, a guy in California, and he's got a couple comrades in rural Michigan. And so we're figuring out how to connect them, right? And that we're one thing that we're constantly doing, Terry, is connecting people in different parts of the country. So I think that the first step, Terry, you got to join the CPI so that you're part of a national network. And then from there, we can help you fill in the gaps. Who knows? Maybe, I don't know where you're located, but maybe you could get the community room at a local library. We could send people from one of our nearby locals to have an event at your library, community room, reserve it. I mean, there's a lot of different options. You can organize wherever you are, but you need other people. You can't organize by yourself. So I think the first step is to become a dues-paying member of the Center for Political Innovation. Go to cpiusa.org and join, and then come on a Zoom call, come on a membership Zoom call and say, I want to organize in my rural area. What advice do people have? Boom. That's the first step, Terry, and I hope that's helpful. Thank you. And Garland is amazing. I'm glad you're liking the show, Garland. I got my strength back, and, I've been working pretty hard. Lavrov was at the UN last week, but I love everything you do, Garland, and I am firmly on your side. So thank you for everything. And you're a great speaker, and I mean, you are awesome. And Jyoti Brar, and the way you're interviewing her so often, and you're doing great stuff, Garland. I'm your biggest fan. Shout out to Garland Nixon. Go subscribe to Garland Nixon's channel if you haven't. Garland is awesome. What do you think of Noam Chomsky? Well, I first heard of Noam Chomsky after 9/11. I was a kid, and Noam Chomsky was like the one leftist voice, critic of foreign policy that was around at the time. So I that's where I first heard of him. And, I read his stuff, and I thought it was very profound at the time because no one else said that. But basically what he said was the U.S. government commits atrocities too. 9/11 was awful, but the U.S. government has bombed and killed a lot of people all over the world. Well, no shit, Sherlock, but nobody was saying that at the time. CNN wasn't saying that. That wasn't allowed on mainstream media at the time. So, that was kind of a cutting edge message back then. The main thing is that, so Noam Chomsky, his mother was a member of the Communist Party USA, which he says she joined because she wanted to play baseball, which I think is hilarious. But, the Communist Party back in Brooklyn, New York in the 1920s and 30s, they had baseball, and they let women play baseball, right? They had, a baseball team for women, girls, right? And so his mom, joined the Young Communist League so she could play baseball. I think his mother also probably believed in the communist ideology, but whenever he's asked about his mother being a Communist Party member, he says, oh yeah, well, she just wanted to play baseball. And, there's more to the story than that, I think. But Noam Chomsky, he's a Jewish guy from New York City, from a certain, he grew up in Brooklyn. And there was a certain group of people who, if you lived in New York City in the 1920s and 30s, and you were from certain neighborhoods, you were in the Communist Party, right? The Communist Party had 2 city council seats back then, right? In Harlem, they had 2 city council seats. In New York City in the 1930s, the Communist Party was a very big organization, and the unemployment councils, et cetera, they controlled certain neighborhoods, and they were a big group. And there were certain demographics of people, recent immigrants from Eastern Europe, et cetera. They were in the Communist Party. Noam Chomsky, as a young teenager, he was a very good, student. He excelled in linguistics. He became like the top linguistic scholar in the United States. And then he was opposed to the Vietnam War because he comes out of like a leftist tradition, right? Because he grew up around the Communist Party or whatever. He started calling himself an anarchist. That was what he called his ideology. But he would give little lectures in in people's living rooms, and he was part of organizing a day of action at MIT on the Boston Common against the Vietnam War. And he was just this professor guy, a very famous linguist. He was famous for being a linguistics, academic, but he was famous for that. But he opposed the Vietnam War. And then he made a big point. He had press conferences, the top linguistic scholar announcing he wasn't going to pay his taxes. Over the course of the 1970s, he just kind of became this well-known American college professor guy who was kind of nerdy and, socially awkward. And, he's kind of the stereotype of, like of a Jewish Marxist intellectual. His name's Noam Chomsky, right? And he's got glasses and he's got the scruffy hair, and he comes on and he says, well, and he's not highly charismatic. He's kind of a stereotype. When people think of like a radical, a Greenwich Village radical, right? Of some guy selling pamphlets talking about, dialectical materialism, and the stereotype of like 1960s, 70s, what you thought a communist was. Right, some guy with a very obscure, ultra-intellectual ideology, and his name is Noam Chomsky, and he's a college professor of linguistics. Most people don't even know what linguistics is, right? And that he's, your hyper-intellectual academic who is a leftist, right? And during the late 70s, that's when Noam Chomsky really started to blow up. He was known in anti-Vietnam War circles in the 60s. But in the late 70s, his books, he was like the guy on NPR who was, he'd go on NPR, he'd go on PBS, and most Americans had never heard of him. But he was the American leftist critic of American foreign policy, right? And what I found to be particularly obnoxious about him was that again, the bulk of what he does, when I was a teenager, I listened to there's all these CDs and cassette tapes of Noam Chomsky you can get from the public library. And, Noam Chomsky, there's a lot out there. And I listened to all of that stuff. And I read the Noam Chomsky Reader, and I read it all. Okay. Most of it consists of this. Yeah, the Soviet Union's bad. Yeah, China and communism are bad, but America also does bad things, and we need democracy. We need people to get more involved, and we need democracy. That's basically the bulk of what he says, right? Democracy is good. U.S. foreign policy is hypocritical. That's about it. And during the 1980s, he played a particularly important role because he was very critical of Israel, and that was not trendy and popular. He was very critical of U.S. aid to Nicaragua and U.S. funding of the Contras. And he was cited as the most cited source in the English language. It's very interesting, right? In many of his bios, he says he's the most cited source in the English language after the Bible. Why is that? Soviet media would always quote him, right? The Soviet press, the Soviet Union would always quote him. And in the Soviet Union, people thought he was a household name. People thought every American knew who Noam Chomsky was. Well, most Americans, if you're not a communist or a leftist or an activist, you'd never heard of Noam Chomsky. But in the Soviet Union, there was this impression that, well, Noam Chomsky wasn't a communist, but he represented this big layer of American academia and American intelligence that were critical of Ronald Reagan and the war hawks, and that Noam Chomsky did not play a good role in the fall of the Soviet Union. And there's a whole layer of people, the Communist Party USA, Angela Davis, and all of that. They were very much using, they were trying to feed disinformation to the Soviet Union and present the United States as not a threat to the Soviet Union. And they were against Ronald Reagan, they were against the conservatives, but they also played up the idea that the USA would let the Soviet Union democratize and become like a welfare state. And that's what Gorbachev believed. Gorbachev and that wing of the Soviet Communist Party that loved Noam Chomsky, that liked the critique of Stalinism, etc. Those forces, they would sit down with the Communist Party, with Bernie Sanders, with Noam Chomsky, people like that, and they got the impression that that the United States would allow the Soviet Union to dissolve and become like a welfare state, like Norway or Sweden, and that part of manipulating and kind of ideologically penetrating the Soviet Communist Party was that the reformist Gorbachev wing of the Soviet Communist Party had a relationship with Noam Chomsky, Amy Goodman, the Communist Party USA, Angela Davis, people like that, and they gave a false impression. They gave the impression that it was only Ronald Reagan that wanted to destroy Russia. It was only the hardliners in the Pentagon who wanted to destroy them. And they played a very negative role of kind of faking out the Soviet Union and spreading disinformation. So that's the first point. The second point is that really since the Obama years, Noam Chomsky's role has been very negative. Noam Chomsky, he supported the bombing of Libya and the destruction of Libya. Noam Chomsky, he supported, the Syria. He said the USA didn't want to topple Assad because it was more of afraid of the revolution from below of the people against Assad, and that since the Obama years, he's completely gone off his rocker. It used to be that he played the role of kind of giving voice to the anti-imperialist side of arguments, but he played kind of a negative role. I think he played a role for intelligence, but his main job was that he was the main public face of criticism of U.S. foreign policy. However, since the Arab Spring, since the Obama administration, he started to play a much more negative and sinister role. Whereas, on Russia, on a lot of things, he says not good stuff, right? And the Trump hysteria and all that. I think he's in the last decade or so, he's played a very, very negative role. But overall, he just represented he was a famous academic, a very famous American academic who started giving voice to a socialistic or lefty critique of U.S. foreign policy, and he became the character in mainstream media, right? Because he looked the part, right? I mean, he was like the stereotype of a Greenwich Village radical, right? He's this ultra intellectual, smart academic, with his glasses on there, and his name's Noam, and he talks like this. He's not very exciting. He's kind of boring, and he's got, and he would call himself an anarcho-syndicalist, and and he's so much more revolutionary than Marx and Lenin. No, Marx and Lenin were authoritarian. I'm an anarcho-syndicalist. Blah blah blah. He was just the stereotype of a radical intellectual, and he played that role in American media. They need somebody to do that. Right? I mean, it would be sketch, right? If they didn't have at least somebody play the role of radical intellectual in American media. Well, they had Noam. Noam played the role of radical intellectual in American media. Michael Parenti was way better than Noam Chomsky. Michael Parenti was an intellectual, but he was much more charismatic. His writing was much more popular, in terms of getting the message across, But yeah, there you go. I mean, that's Noam Chomsky, right? Noam Chomsky is just I don't know. I mean, he was a very famous American academic who took, leftist stances on U.S. foreign policy. He was the stereotype of a leftist during the Cold War years and in the 90s. And then in the last decade, he's just completely gone out of his mind. And he on the vaccine, on Trump, on everything, he's just completely, deteriorated. He was very bad during the Obama years. And many people say he's been an intelligence asset for a long time, and I believe that's probably the case, right? But that doesn't mean he doesn't say true things, right? And his critiques of U.S. society, I mean, he says a lot of true things even now, right? You read his books, even now, he says a lot of true things. But in the last decade, he's played a particularly negative role, I would argue. Michael Parenti is kind of a contemporary of Noam Chomsky. He's much less well known, but he was a pro-Soviet communist in the 80s. Michael Parenti played a much better role. So there you go. There you go. All right. Well, I answered everybody's questions. It was a great stream tonight. Thanks for asking me all those questions and everything, folks. And I will put on the closing music. I did this last night. Maybe I'll start doing this. I'm going to put on 2 closing musics, basically. Because I like the Little Light of Mine video, and then I like the actual mantra. So I just like to show off what CPI does before I show the other video. So there we go. then now we'll put on the mantra. All right.
Surge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.
All right. Thanks, folks.